Every night, something extraordinary happens to you, so familiar that you barely notice it. You climb into bed, close your eyes, and slowly lose contact with the world. The room around you disappears. The concerns that occupied your mind throughout the day dissolve into silence. The identity you spend every waking moment protecting and maintaining fades away. Then, for several hours, you enter a state that remains one of the greatest mysteries in human existence. You dream. Dreams have always fascinated us. Ancient civilizations treated them as messages from the gods. Religious traditions viewed them as portals to deeper truths. Psychologists saw them as windows into the hidden architecture of the mind. Despite centuries of disagreement about what dreams are, one intuition has persisted across cultures and eras. The feeling that dreams are revealing something that we can't normally see. Just as we can't see the inside of a black hole, yet we can observe its effects, and cannot directly observe a quantum system, yet we can learn about it through the traces that it leaves behind, perhaps dreams are traces of something hidden beneath the surface of conscious experience. And in one of the strangest discoveries in modern physics, scientists recently found that a hidden quantum system could reveal itself through something called an echo, which begs the question, what if dreams are doing the same thing? So, in 2024, researchers at Google announced a breakthrough involving a quantum computer known as Willow. The achievement was technical and highly specialized. To learn more about that, watch our video on quantum computing. But buried within it was an idea that feels strangely relevant to the mystery of dreaming. The researchers developed a method known as a quantum echo. Now, to understand what this means, think about how bats navigate in complete darkness. They can't see the cave around them, so instead they emit high-frequency sounds throughout the walls of the cave, and then they listen to the echoes that bounce back. From these echoes, they can build a surprisingly accurate map of their surroundings. And humans, us, we do something similar with sonar. By sending sound waves into the depths of the ocean and measuring what bounces back at us, we can map underwater landscapes or dense rainforest canopies that would otherwise remain invisible. In each case, the principle is the same. When a system is too complex or too dark or too hidden to observe directly, an echo can reveal to us what our eyes can't see. So, the researchers at Google were able to do something similar with quantum computers. A signal is sent through an enormously complex quantum system consisting of more than 100 qubits. During its journey, researchers introduce a tiny disturbance. It's a microscopic change that then spreads through the system. They then reverse the entire process, causing the signal to travel backward. When the returning signal encounters the original one, interference patterns begin to emerge, and these patterns look like an echo. They reveal hidden information about the system's internal structure. By examining the echo, researchers can learn things that would otherwise remain invisible. Now, what makes this idea so fascinating is that it resembles an ancient psychological theory about consciousness. Carl Jung believed that every human being contains a vast unconscious realm that exists beyond ordinary awareness. According to Jung, the conscious mind is only a small island surrounded by an immense ocean of psychological activity. Beneath our awareness lies a world of forgotten memories, suppressed emotions, instinctive drives, archetypal patterns, and latent possibilities. While our conscious mind focuses on the immediate demands of everyday life, the unconscious continues to observe and process and connect information in the background. Jung often spoke about the unconscious as though it possessed its own perspective. It notices things before we do. It recognizes contradictions that we tend to ignore. It detects emotional conflicts that we refuse to acknowledge, but most importantly, it attempts to communicate these insights through its own echoes, and these are dreams. To Jung, dreams are psychological echoes, even though he didn't use those words exactly, but they were sent upwards from the depths of the psyche. They aren't necessarily literal messages, but symbolic ones. The unconscious speaks a different language from the conscious. It communicates through images, metaphors, emotions, and stories rather than direct statements. When you see this, you can understand how it sounds like the echoes that we've been talking about. Just as Google's quantum computer sends a signal into a hidden system and receives information in return, the human mind may descend into sleep and receive signals from regions of itself that are normally inaccessible when you're awake. The dream becomes an interference pattern created by the interaction between conscious awareness and unconscious processes. It is the visible result of an invisible conversation taking place beneath the surface of experience. This idea helps explain why dreams often feel so strange to us. If the unconscious were simply presenting information directly, dreams would look like ordinary waking thoughts. Instead, they arrive wrapped in symbolism, just like the bat doesn't actually see what the inside of the cave looks like, only a representation of it. A dream about a collapsing house may have nothing to do with actual architecture. A dream about being chased may have nothing to do with actual physical danger. The images themselves are often less important than the emotional truths that they represent. The unconscious appears to communicate through symbols because symbols are capable of expressing layers of meaning that ordinary language just can't. Jung noticed that many of his patients experienced dreams that seemed to understand them better than they understood themselves. People would dream about problems they hadn't consciously recognized. They would encounter symbolic warnings months before a psychological crisis emerged. Sometimes a dream would reveal a hidden fear, an unresolved conflict, or an emotional wound that had remained invisible for years. The dream didn't create the problem. Instead, it exposed something that was already there, just hidden in plain sight. This is what makes dreaming so difficult for us to dismiss. Even if every dream originates entirely within the brain, the question still remains: why is the brain generating them at all? Why devote so much energy to constructing these elaborate symbolic worlds every single night? Why does evolution preserve a process that consumes thousands of hours across a human lifetime if it serves no real purpose? It's then logical to suppose that dreams might serve a purpose far more profound than simple entertainment during sleep. Perhaps they are just part of a navigational system. As a bat uses echolocation to move through darkness, the mind may use dreams to navigate regions of itself that can't be directly observed. The unconscious sends signals upward. Consciousness receives them. The resulting dream becomes a map of hidden territory. And if that's true, then every night we participate in a process far stranger than we realize. We assume that sleep is a period of absence, a temporary shutdown of consciousness before waking life resumes. But what if sleep isn't an absence at all? What if it's a journey inwards? What if dreams are the echoes that return from places within ourselves that we rarely encounter during the day? Because if dreams truly are psychological echoes, then every dream carries the possibility of revelation. Every dream may contain information that consciousness has overlooked. Every dream may be evidence that another intelligence exists within us, patiently observing from the darkness and waiting for an opportunity to speak. We've talked about how strange the concept of sleep is. For hours at a time, your conscious experience either transforms completely or seems to disappear altogether. Yet while you're gone, countless processes continue running in the background without your knowledge. The internet works in a surprisingly similar way. While you're busy living your life in blissful ignorance, companies you've never heard of are constantly collecting, storing, and selling information about you. Everything from your name and location to your employment status, email address, and browsing habits. At best, that information is sold to advertisers trying to target you with ads. At worst, it ends up in the hands of bad actors looking to scam, impersonate, or exploit you. Thankfully, you can protect yourself using Incogni, the sponsor of today's episode. Incogni is a service that removes your personal information from the places you never even knew it was being stored. Data brokers, people search sites, and directories that treat your identity like a product. By law, these companies have to delete your data if you ask, but doing that yourself can take weeks, months, or even years. Incogni handles it automatically, continuously sending removal requests and working in the background to keep your data out of reach. And they've just introduced a new feature called custom removals. If you find a site exposing your personal information, you can simply send the link to Incogni, and their team will work to get it taken down, even if it's outside of their usual network. If you want to take back control of your personal information and stop data brokers from building profiles on you without your knowledge, go to incogni.com/Aperture deal and use the code Aperture deal to get 60% off an annual plan. Now back to our story. Most dreams disappear almost immediately after waking. Within minutes, their details begin to dissolve. By lunchtime, only fragments remain. A face without a name, a place that never existed, a feeling that lingers long after the images themselves have vanished. Yet, every so often, a dream behaves differently. Instead of fading, it embeds itself into memory with extraordinary force. Years later, the dream remains as vivid as the day it first happened. Sometimes people remember the colors, the atmosphere, even specific details that would normally be forgotten. More importantly, they often describe the dream as having changed them. Carl Jung became fascinated by these experiences. He called them big dreams. Unlike ordinary dreams, big dreams seem to arrive from deeper layers of the psyche. They possess an unusual emotional gravity. The dreamer often wakes with the unmistakable feeling that something important has happened, even if they can't immediately understand what it means. Jung observed that these dreams frequently appeared during major transitions in life. They emerged before psychological crisis, before profound personal transformations, and before moments when an individual stood at a crossroads without fully realizing it. What makes these dreams so powerful isn't necessarily their content. Sometimes the imagery is surprisingly simple. A person encounters a mysterious stranger, or a bridge collapses. A door opens into an unfamiliar room. On the surface, nothing extraordinary is occurring, and yet, the dream seems to contain more meaning than its images can account for. It feels charged with significance, as though it were carrying information from a deeper source. And this brings us back to the idea of the quantum echo. One of the most fascinating aspects of Google's experiment involved what physicists call a perturbation. Before reversing the signal, researchers introduced a tiny disturbance into the quantum system. The change was almost absurdly small. A single qubit was altered. Yet this microscopic modification propagated throughout the entire system. By examining how the disturbance evolved and interacted with the returning signal, researchers were able to uncover hidden structures that couldn't be observed directly. The entire process depended on something remarkably counterintuitive. A tiny cause leading to a disproportionately large result. In other words, the butterfly effect. Dreams often seem to operate according to a similar principle. A single image in a dream can alter the course of a person's life, just as a butterfly flapping its wings in a rainforest may, through an invisible chain of consequences, change weather patterns on the other side of the planet. The image itself may appear trivial, yet it functions like a psychological perturbation, introducing new information into our consciousness. Once the signal arrives, it begins spreading through the system. The dreamer reflects on it and questions emerge. Assumptions are challenged. Long-ignored feelings begin demanding our attention. What started as a fleeting image gradually transforms into a whole new way of seeing reality. Jung believed that this occurs because dreams reveal patterns that consciousness has failed to recognize. While our waking attention focuses on immediate concerns, the unconscious continuously gathers this information. It notices subtle changes in mood. It tracks recurring emotional conflicts. It detects contradictions between our stated beliefs and our actual behavior. Over time, these observations accumulate into a picture that may be far more complete than the one available to our own conscious awareness. Modern neuroscience actually offers a very interesting parallel. At any given moment, your brain is processing vastly more information than you consciously experience. Most of this activity never enters our direct awareness. Countless signals are filtered out before they reach conscious thought, and yet those signals don't disappear. They continue to influence our behavior from beneath the surface. In fact, actually, experiments have repeatedly suggested that the brain begins moving towards a decision before the conscious mind becomes aware of making one. The feeling of choosing may arrive after the process has already begun. Consciously, it seems, it's often less like the author of our own thoughts and more like a translator, trying to catch up to a story that is already unfolding. So this creates a very intriguing possibility. Perhaps dreams are one of the mechanisms through which hidden information reaches our consciousness. Perhaps they represent moments where the brain attempts to communicate conclusions that it has already reached unconsciously. Consider how often people describe realizing something through a dream that they somehow already knew. The dream isn't necessarily revealing new information to us, but instead it reorganizes existing information into a form that can finally be understood by us. A person dreams about a crumbling building and suddenly recognizes the instability of a relationship. Another dreams about a missing train and realizes they are terrified of wasting their life. The insight feels surprising yet strangely familiar at the same time. The dream acts as an echo, carrying hidden knowledge back to the surface. This idea becomes even more fascinating when we consider reports of dreams that appear to predict future events. And human history is filled with these stories of prophetic dreams. Kings consulted dream interpreters before making political decisions. Military leaders delayed campaigns because of ominous visions had during sleep. Entire religious traditions developed around the belief that dreams could reveal future possibilities to us. Modern people tend to dismiss such accounts as superstition, and yet the phenomenon itself has never fully disappeared. Even today, countless individuals report dreams that seem uncannily predictive. They dream about conversations before they happen. They dream about accidents, illnesses, or unexpected encounters that later happen in real life. Now, most of these stories can be explained through coincidence, or selective memory, or the tendency to reinterpret events after the fact. Human beings are excellent pattern-seeking creatures, and we often connect unrelated events into meaningful narratives. And yet, there may be another explanation that isn't mystical as dreams predicting the future, but perhaps even more interesting. Imagine that the unconscious mind is constantly analyzing information before conscious awareness. It notices subtle tensions in a relationship long before you realize the toxicity. It detects signs of physical illness before symptoms become obvious. It recognizes patterns in behavior that point towards future outcomes. If a dream emerges from this deeper level of analysis, it may appear prophetic without requiring any supernatural mechanisms. The unconscious may simply be better at prediction than our consciousness. A skilled chess player can often sense the direction of a game several moves in advance, even without actively having to think about it. If you were to ask them, they maybe wouldn't necessarily be able to explain how they know, but years of pattern recognition allows them to anticipate future possibilities. Perhaps the unconscious functions in a similar way. It models reality, generating predictions based on information that never reaches conscious awareness. If this is true, then the dream isn't showing us the future, it's showing us a future. One possible trajectory among many, an echo of where our current path may lead. Jung found this possibility deeply compelling because it transformed dreams from passive experiences into active guides. The dream was no longer a reflection of the past, it became a tool for navigating the present and a vision for the future. And this may explain why certain dreams feel less like memories and more like messages. The dream isn't merely replaying information to us, it's reorganizing it into a form that consciousness can understand. And sometimes the signal is so powerful that it becomes impossible to ignore. But if we agree that dreams are echoes, then the next logical question becomes, what is the source of the echo itself? And this is where things start to get a lot stranger. Because eventually we arrive at a mystery that has troubled philosophers, mystics, and psychologists for centuries. A mystery hidden inside the simplest question imaginable. What exactly happens to consciousness when we fall asleep? At first, the question sounds simple. We assume we already know the answer. The brain enters different stages of activity, dreams emerge and disappear, and then we wake up. But the more closely we examine the experience of sleep, the stranger it becomes. Consider what happens every single night. You lie down in bed, you close your eyes, and gradually you lose awareness of the world. The room disappears, sounds fade into the background, and thoughts become fragmented. Then at some point, your consciousness itself seems to vanish. Hours pass, and yet from your perspective, no time has passed at all. This is one of the most overlooked mysteries in human existence. We spend nearly a third of our lives asleep, but we rarely stop to consider what that actually means. During waking life, experience unfolds continuously. One moment leads to another. There's a sense of duration, of movement, and persistence. Even when we're bored, the consciousness remains present. But dreamless sleep appears different. There's no through line, no story, no memory, no awareness of passing time. One moment, you are falling asleep, and the next you are waking up. Between these 2 points lies an apparent void, a gap in existence. The philosopher Schopenhauer once compared sleep to a temporary return to the state that existed before birth. More modern thinkers have described it as a kind of nightly death, an interruption in the stream of conscious experience so complete that it raises uncomfortable questions about personal identity itself. After all, if consciousness completely disappears each night, what exactly returns in the morning? Well, the answer seems obvious. You return. But when examined carefully, the certainty begins to weaken. The self feels continuous because memory creates continuity. You remember who you are. You remember yesterday. You remember falling asleep. Those memories create the impression of an uninterrupted existence, and yet the actual experience of dreamless sleep remains inaccessible. Consciousness seems to vanish entirely. Some traditions have embraced this mystery rather than avoiding it. In ancient Greece, sleep and death were represented as twin brothers. Across many cultures, sleep was understood as a temporary journey into the unknown, a brief departure from ordinary reality. Even today, there is something unsettling about surrendering our consciousness. Every night we willingly allow the most intimate aspects of our existence to dissolve into darkness. The philosopher Thomas Nagel once asked what it was like to be a bat. His point was that conscious experience possesses a subjective quality that can't be fully explained from the outside. We know what it feels like to be ourselves because we experience it directly. But what does it feel like to be unconscious? The question can't be answered because there is no one there to answer it. Dreaming at least provides content. Dreams are experiences. However strange they may be, there is still a world being perceived. Dreamless sleep offers something entirely different. It appears to be the absence of a world altogether. And yet, consciousness somehow returns at the end of it all. Each morning, awareness reassembles itself. The universe comes back online. The familiar narrative of I resumes exactly where it left off. Why? What determines that consciousness returns at all? Most scientific explanations focus on brain activity. Certain neural networks deactivate while others remain active. Various regions coordinate the transition between wakefulness and sleep, and these explanations are valuable, but they leave a deeper philosophical question unanswered. Why does subjective experience emerge from this process in the first place? Why is there something like consciousness? And where does that something go when consciousness disappears? Carl Jung approached this mystery from a very unique angle. Late in life, Jung recorded one of the strangest dreams of his career. Unlike many of his other dreams, this one seemed to challenge his understanding of identity itself. In the dream, Jung found himself standing inside of a temple. There, seated in deep meditation, was a yogi. The figure appeared ancient, serene, and completely absorbed in contemplation. As Jung observed the meditator, he gradually noticed something troubling. The yogi had Jung's face. The realization struck him with immense force. At first, Jung assumed he was observing another version of himself. Then a more disturbing possibility emerged. What if the relationship was reversed? What if the yogi was not being dreamed by Jung? What if Jung was being dreamed by the yogi? The dream produced an overwhelming insight. The meditating figure seemed to exist at a deeper level of reality than the conscious personality that Jung identified with. The ordinary Jung, the man moving through daily life, suddenly felt like a secondary character, almost fictional. He sensed that if the yogi were ever to awaken, Jung himself would disappear. That dream haunted him for years, because beneath its bizarre imagery lies a profound philosophical question. What if the conscious self is not the deepest layer of identity? What if the person that you think you are exists only at the surface? Modern psychology often describes consciousness as a small fraction of mental activity. Most cognitive processes occur outside of awareness. Decisions begin unconsciously before they enter consciousness. Emotions emerge from systems that we can't directly control. Perceptions are constructed by mechanisms operating beyond our awareness. Like I said earlier, the conscious self may be less like a ruler and more like a translator. Jung's dream takes this idea to its logical extreme. Imagine that your waking identity is only the visible portion of a much larger process. Imagine that beneath your everyday awareness exists a deeper intelligence, one so vast that your conscious personality represents only a temporary expression of it. In that case, falling asleep wouldn't mean consciousness disappears, it would mean consciousness retreats from one level of reality to another. The dreamer would become the dreamed. The observer would become the observed. The self would discover that it is part of something larger than itself. This possibility appears repeatedly through human history. Mystics describe awakening from the illusion of individuality. Eastern philosophies speak of the ego as a temporary construction rather than an ultimate reality. Certain religious traditions portray ordinary consciousness as a dream from which deeper awareness eventually emerges. Of course, none of this proves that such ideas are true, but their similarity across cultures with no interaction to one another is striking. Across different cultures, centuries, and belief systems, people repeatedly arrive at the same intuition. The feeling that the self we experience every day may not be the deepest level of the self that exists. Perhaps this is why sleep feels so mysterious. Every night we are approaching a boundary. On one side lies the familiar world of waking consciousness. On the other lies a territory that we barely understand. Dreams emerge from that territory, carrying symbols, warnings, insights, and strange fragments of meaning. Yet beyond the dreams themselves lies something even more elusive, the darkness from which they emerge. And if dreams are echoes, then perhaps the most important question isn't what the echoes mean to us. Perhaps the real question is what's creating them. Anyone who has experienced a vivid dream knows how convincing they can be. While the dream is happening, it rarely feels imaginary. The dream world possesses its own internal logic, its own physics, and its own sense of reality. We accept impossible events without question. We speak to people who have been dead for years or who have never existed. We visit places that don't exist. We watch entire narratives unfold. Yet throughout the experience, everything feels perfectly normal to us. It's only after waking that we recognize how strange it all was. And this creates an interesting problem. How do you know you're awake right now? Well, at first, the answer seems obvious. Pinch yourself. Reality feels stable. The laws of physics behave consistently. Memory connects one moment to the next. Unlike dreams, our waking life appears coherent. But dreams often feel coherent while we are inside them. In fact, one of the more troubling experiences a person can have is what psychologists call a false awakening. The dreamer wakes up inside a dream, and everything appears normal. You are back inside your bedroom, and your bedroom looks correct. So your morning routine begins. Reality seems perfectly intact. Then something impossible happens. The dreamer realizes they are still asleep. Sometimes this process repeats multiple times. A person wakes up only to discover that they are dreaming. Then they wake up again and again. Each layer feels more convincing than the last. These experiences are often called nesting dreams. People who have undergone them frequently describe a profound sense of disorientation afterwards. For a brief period, the boundary between dream and reality feels uncertain. If the previous layer felt real while it was happening, what guarantees that the current layer is any different? Well, philosophers have been haunted by this question for centuries. In the 17th century, René Descartes famously wondered whether any experience could prove with certainty that he was awake. Every test he devised encountered the same problem. Dreams could imitate nearly everything he experienced during waking life. If a dream can reproduce sight and sound, touch, memory, emotion, and narrative continuity, then what criterion remains for distinguishing one state from the other? The question remains surprisingly difficult to answer. Most of us rely on practical certainty. We assume we're awake because reality behaves consistently over time. And yet, from a purely subjective perspective, consciousness experiences both states directly. The dream feels real while it lasts. Waking life feels real while it lasts. This is where the metaphor of the quantum echo becomes particularly interesting. One way to think of dreams is as a simulation. Modern neuroscience increasingly suggests that the brain functions as a prediction engine. Rather than passively observing reality, it continuously generates models of the world and updates them using incoming information. In a sense, the brain is always simulating reality. Perception itself may be partly constructed from internal predictions. Dreaming appears to take this tendency even further. during sleep, external sensory input decreases dramatically. The brain becomes free to generate entire worlds from within. It creates environments, characters, conflicts, and whole scenarios. It runs simulations. Many researchers believe this serves an adaptive purpose. Dreams may help us rehearse threats. They may allow us to explore social situations in a safe environment. They may help consolidate memories, process emotions, and prepare for future challenges. In this view, dreaming is less like watching a movie and more like playing the training area in a video game. The sleeping mind generates possibilities and examines their consequences. It experiments, it explores, and it asks questions. What happens to us if this relationship ends? Or what happens to me if I fail to reach my goal? Or what happens if my biggest fear becomes true? The dream becomes a laboratory for consciousness. But then, many people also report experiences that feel far longer than the actual duration of the dream. Some describe living through years of subjective experience. Others report entire alternative lives complete with relationships, histories, and their own memories. When they wake, the emotional impact can be overwhelming. There are accounts of people mourning dream families that never existed. Others struggle to reconcile memories from dreams with memories from waking life. For a brief period, both seem equally real. Such experiences reveal something remarkable about consciousness. Reality isn't simply something we observe. Reality is something that we construct. The world you experience is always filtered through the brain's interpretation of information. Dreams demonstrate just how powerful that interpretive process can become. Given the right conditions, the mind can create worlds capable of rivaling reality. And this raises such a provocative possibility. What if waking consciousness itself is only one level within a larger hierarchy? After all, every dream feels real until a higher level of awareness appears. The dreamer wakes and suddenly recognizes the dream for what it was. The previous reality is revealed as a construction nestled within a broader reality. But what if the process doesn't stop? What if waking consciousness is simply another layer? This idea appears in countless philosophical and spiritual traditions. Plato imagined an ordinary reality as shadows projected onto a cave wall. Hindu philosophy describes the world as Maya, a veil of appearances. Mystics throughout history have spoken of awakening from ordinary consciousness into a more fundamental reality. Again, these traditions differ enormously in their details, yet they often converge on a similar intuition, that the reality that we take for granted may not be the deepest reality available to us. Dreams provide a glimpse of how such a thing could be possible. Every night, consciousness effortlessly generates convincing worlds. Every morning, it abandons them and moves into another. The transition feels natural because we have experienced it thousands of times. But perhaps we have become too accustomed to the miracle. Perhaps the truly astonishing fact is not that dreams feel real. Perhaps the astonishing fact is that reality itself feels real. The same consciousness that constructs dream worlds is the consciousness through which you experience everything else. The same mind capable of creating entire universes during sleep is the mind through which your waking world appears. And if dreams are echoes emerging from deeper layers of the psyche, then maybe they serve another purpose as well. Maybe they remind us that reality is more fragile, more mysterious, and more dependent upon consciousness than we usually imagine. Because once you realize that entire worlds can emerge from the mind, another question becomes impossible to ignore. If dreams can alter our experience of space and reality, what about our experience of time? There's one final aspect of the quantum echo that makes it such a powerful metaphor for dreaming. The output of Google's experiment is something physicists call an out-of-time ordered correlator, or OTOC. Despite the intimidating name, the basic idea is surprisingly simple. An OTOC measures how information spreads through a complex system over time. It reveals how different parts of the system influence one another across both space and time, exposing relationships that would otherwise remain hidden. In other words, the quantum echo is not merely telling researchers what a system looks like, it is revealing how events separated in time are connected. For a physicist, this is a technical tool. For anyone interested in dreams, it is an irresistible metaphor, because one of the strangest features of dreaming is its relationship with time. Dreams seem to obey entirely different temporal rules from waking life. Hours can pass in seconds. Entire narratives can unfold within moments. Past experiences merge with imagined futures. Events separated by decades appear side by side as though they're occurring simultaneously. The ordinary flow of time becomes fluid, almost irrelevant. Many people have experienced dreams that they feel as though they exist outside chronology altogether. Childhood memories blend seamlessly with present concerns. Future anxieties appear as symbolic landscapes. Long-dead relatives speak about events that have not yet happened. The dream mind moves through time the way a person might move through rooms in a house in a non-linear fashion. This is one reason dreams have always seemed prophetic to us. What matters isn't whether every claim is true. What matters is that the experience itself feels profoundly convincing to those who are experiencing it. The dream creates the impression that consciousness has briefly escaped the normal flow of time. Carl Jung became fascinated by this possibility. While he remained cautious about supernatural explanations, he also recognized that human experience sometimes contains coincidences so meaningful that they become rather difficult to easily resist. He referred to these events as synchronicities. They weren't necessarily examples of mystical causation. Instead, they seemed to be examples of connection, inner experiences and outer events aligning in ways that felt deeply significant. Dreams often occupy the center of these stories. A person dreams of an old friend and unexpectedly encounters them the next day. Someone dreams of a major life transition shortly before it actually arrives. A symbolic image appears repeatedly until an event finally gives it meaning. Whether these experiences represent unconscious prediction or something stranger, they produce the same feeling. The sense that consciousness may perceive patterns extending beyond the present moment. Perhaps this is because the unconscious experiences time differently. Your conscious mind lives almost entirely in the present from moment to moment. It focuses on immediate tasks, or immediate threats, or immediate goals. The unconscious operates on a broader scale. It integrates years of memories, emotional associations, and behavioral patterns. It continuously models possible futures based on available information. From this perspective, the unconscious resembles an extraordinarily sophisticated predictive engine. It is constantly asking questions. Where is this relationship heading? What happens to me if these habits continue? What future emerges from the choices that are being made today? And the answers to those questions arrive as dreams. An experienced sailor often predicts a storm hours before it arrives. The prediction doesn't require supernatural knowledge. It emerges from sensitivity to subtle patterns invisible to inexperienced voyagers. Perhaps dreams function similarly. Perhaps what feels like prophecy is just really good pattern recognition operating beneath awareness. Yet even this explanation leaves some mystery behind. Why does the unconscious communicate to us through stories? Why dreams? Why not simply present these conclusions directly? The answer may lie in the nature of consciousness itself. Facts can change behavior less effectively than experiences can. A person can intellectually understand a problem for years without taking action. A powerful dream can communicate the same truth in a single night. And let's be honest, facts do not change people's minds. Feelings do. Dreams are a powerful way to shape those feelings. The dream succeeds because it doesn't merely tell us something, it's allowing us to experience something. And this brings us back to the central idea of the quantum echo. So let's go back to a bat flying through a cave. The bat can't see the darkness directly, it can't observe every wall or every tunnel or every obstacle. Instead, it is sending signals outward and listening carefully to what comes back to it. The echoes then create a map. The invisible then becomes visible. The unknown becomes navigable. Perhaps dreams serve a similar function. The human psyche is too vast to fully comprehend. Beneath conscious awareness lies an immense landscape of memories, instincts, fears, desires, archetypes, and possibilities. We can't directly observe most of it. We can't walk through it the way we would walk through a city. It remains hidden from us in darkness. So, the mind sends a signal into itself. Dreams are what come back to us. They're echoes generated by the interaction between conscious awareness and unconscious depths. They reveal hidden structures. They expose emotional truths. They forecast possible futures. They guide adaptation and growth. Sometimes they warn. Sometimes they comfort. Sometimes they confront us with realities that we would rather avoid. But they always remind us of the same thing. We are larger than we appear. The conscious self feels like the center of identity, and yet it may be only the surface of a much deeper process. Every night, that deeper process becomes visible for a few brief hours. Images emerge from darkness. Stories rise from hidden regions in the mind. Signals travel upward from places we rarely encounter during the day. But then, morning arrives. The dream dissolves. The ordinary world returns to us. Emails need answering. Conversations need to be had. Life resumes its familiar rhythm. Yet somewhere, beneath that routine, the deeper mind is continuing its work. It continues observing. It continues connecting. It continues to generate echoes. And tonight, when you fall asleep, the process will begin again. Your conscious world will fade. The darkness will return. And from somewhere beyond the boundaries of ordinary awareness, another signal will start its journey back towards the surface. The question is whether you're going to listen. Because if dreams are quantum echoes of the soul, then sleep is not an escape from reality. It's a conversation within the hidden parts of ourselves that reality often keeps silent. And every dream is an answer to a question we didn't know that we were asking. We've only just scratched the surface of the research that discovered the concept of quantum echoes. Watch this video to learn all there is to know about it and how it transformed quantum computing.